From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 65. We've got an awesome guest today, one of the really good guys in the game who comes from a bunch of different experiences, growing up in the Midwest and then playing overseas before he came back here to the U.S. So we're in for a really good show that highlights a lot of different baseball cultures, teaches a lot of important lessons for both players and coaches and parents alike. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. I'm an avid user of Athletic Greens myself, in spite of the fact that I tend to be a supplement minimalist. To me, this is a product that is much more like whole food nutritional insurance as opposed to a true supplement. The ingredients have been carefully selected at the highest quality, most natural source. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and that's the zero compromise approach from the company. It's plant-based, sourced from whole foods at the highest qualities. You won't find harmful chemicals, artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, or added sugar. Really, it's perfect for folks who are gluten and dairy-free, paleo, keto, vegan-friendly, great for people who are intermittent fasting, all that fun stuff. Personally, I love it for obviously our athletes who don't get enough nutritional benefits from fruits and vegetables because they don't eat enough. So it's a way to kind of plug in holes in diets. But also, I really like it for our college and professional athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always at hand. On a personal level, I'm a husband, father of 3, and an entrepreneur. We split our time between 2 states, and I'm also still an avid lifter. So life is inherently crazy, and it can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is definitely something that we encounter. So I rely on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of how crazy our lifestyle is. They've got a great offer in place. If you head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey, they'll get you 20 free travel packets with your purchase. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you can claim your special offer. Today's guest grew up in Indiana and was drafted out of high school by the Astros in the 3rd round of the 2005 MLB draft. He opted not to sign and instead attended the University of Tennessee. After 1 season as a starting pitcher for Tennessee, he transferred home to Purdue, where he became the closer. The Dodgers selected him in the 2nd round of the 2008 MLB draft, and he worked his way up to Double-A in his first season with the organization. He made his major league debut in 2011, pitching 29 2/3 innings that year with a 2.73 ERA and 28 strikeouts. In the years that followed, he spent time with the Phillies, Rangers, A's, and Pirates before he headed to Korea for the 2015 and 2016 seasons with the Lotte Giants. After those 2 successful seasons, he returned on a minor league deal with the Pirates in 2017. Halfway through the season, he re-signed with the Giants to return to Korea. That offseason, he signed with the Doosan Bears and had a breakout season in 2018. He started 26 games and compiled a 15-4 record, a league-leading 2.88 ERA, and the Pitcher's Gold Glove Award. The following year, he received the 2019 KBO League Most Valuable Player Award after posting a 20-3 record with a 2.50 ERA and 189 strikeouts over 194 2/3 innings. He also received his 2nd consecutive Pitcher's Gold Glove Award in 2019. This past December, he signed a 3-year deal with the Milwaukee Brewers to come back to the United States. Please welcome to the show, Josh Lindblom. Welcome to the show, Josh. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, man. Rekindling old relationships from years past. I'm excited to catch up on your career and hear what's new. So as a brief background, we connected, I want to say it was probably the fall of 2015. And spent a couple off seasons together, and your daughter, I think, was born with a congenital heart thing, right?
Yep.
And that was what led you to stick around in Indianapolis. She's doing well now?
She is. She's doing very well. She's awesome. 3. She's rambunctious, and she's the life of our of our family. She never stops.
Awesome. So always good to start a podcast off with great news.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. You're an Indiana guy.
hmm
You're born and raised. So were you a multi-sport athlete back in there?
I was, but I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of my greatest regrets going through high school was that I only played baseball.
Yeah.
But I was on the intramural circuit, so I was like the Shaquille O'Neal of intramural basketball. But growing up in Indiana, I played all the sports, but
Mm-hmm.
organized, like they weren't organized.
Yeah.
But I loved playing football. I loved playing basketball, and I wish that I would have played those in high school, but I didn't.
I feel like, yeah, if you're in Indiana, you at least got to play pickup hoops, right?
Yep,
That's the way it
yep,
works.
for sure.
So I'm curious, like you say you regret not doing it. Do you feel like it impacted your development? Do you feel like it was, not rolling with a different social circle? What was it that you feel like you missed out on?
I think a lot of it was just my friends.
Yeah.
All my friends that were on the baseball team, they all played football, they all played basketball. I felt like I was pretty good at it. The football coach and basketball coach always asked me to play.
Mm-hmm.
I just never did. I was so focused on baseball through high school that, I did the lessons in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
played all summer, took a brief break in the fall, but I was just, I was committed to baseball. I knew that if I was going to have a future in, sports, it was going to be with baseball. It wasn't going to be
Mm-hmm.
with the other two. So from a really young age, I don't want to say I specialized because I
Yeah.
didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I still played other sports. I
Yeah.
still was a kid. So it wasn't like I was just playing baseball.
Yeah, I think people forget too, like, just because you didn't play other sports in like an organized season long format doesn't mean you were, like I know for me personally, I can remember in high school messing around with street hockey and, whatever we did in gym class, ultimate frisbee, all that
hmm
stuff. But just because it wasn't an organized season doesn't mean you're not getting the benefits. And then obviously strength and conditioning can give you a lot of that versatility that you might otherwise get from playing hoops or football or whatever it was. So,
Yeah, and I was actually really lucky from a strength and conditioning
yeah.
standpoint. I had an opportunity at a very young age to go over to Purdue and meet with, the strength coach over there at the time was Jim Lathrop.
Mm-hmm.
And, he introduced me to the strength and conditioning world at a very young age. So, I think having that foundation helped
Yeah.
me. I remember in the summer times, playing, ultimate frisbee on the practice fields, when Drew Brees was there,
Yeah.
guys like Vinny Sutherland, Matt Mitrione. So I remember being around those guys and being exposed to high level athletes, through that.
That's huge. Now you were a third rounder out of high school.
hmm
Give me the scouting report on you out of high school. Where were you at relative to kind of today's third rounders? We're recording this a week after the draft, so I'm intrigued.
Man, I don't know. That's a good question. It seems like everyone throws so hard now. So
Yeah,
I was probably like I probably wouldn't have been drafted.
yeah,
Um, but I was like, I was 90 to 95 out of high
mm-hmm.
school. Um, I feel like I could spin a breaking ball. I had good feel for a changeup.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably one of those projectable guys. I was
Yep.
tall, kind of lanky. They saw me. They could put some weight on me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a hard decision, to sign or to go to college.
Yeah. What was the rash? Obviously, you made the decision. You went to Tennessee out of
hmm
school. What was the rationale for heading to college for you? What tipped the scales?
Yeah, I think it boiled down to like immaturity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, retrospectively looking back on it, I probably wouldn't have told you that when I was 17 years old, but I think a lot of it had to do with just immaturity. I don't know that I would have made it if I would have signed. And going to college for me, being in a structured program, learning from coaches, having study tables and having practice and balancing schoolwork. That really helped me grow and mature. And, college for me was the best fit.
Absolutely, and I'm curious. So you spent a year at Tennessee, and
Mhm.
then transferred back closer to home to Purdue. What was the rationale
Mhm.
for the change after that first year? Because you were a starter for Tennessee, correct? You got innings
Yeah, it was.
right off the bat.
Yeah. Not to get into too much detail, but, it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Um, you know, growing up in Indiana, like you're talking about, you go to SEC, you go play in the SEC. I was
Yeah.
a weekend starter my freshman year. And there was some cultural stuff, with the team that really didn't sit well with me. And then, just having to make that decision, to transfer, I felt bad because I'd made a commitment, not only to university, but to my teammates, but, it was just a thing where it just wasn't a good fit.
Hmm.
And, coming back home to Purdue, being close to home, I'd grown up around the coaching staff.
Hmm.
I knew what they stood for, and it was great for me. And, I give a lot of credit to, Coach Schreiber when he was at Purdue, developing and molding me, kind of into the person that I am today.
It went well for you too. And you correct me if I'm wrong. You became the closer at Purdue when you went back
Hmm.
to there. Did you stay in that role right up until the time you were drafted, or did you go back to starting before the draft?
No, I stayed in the closer role, and then
Hmm.
when I was drafted, they put me back into the rotation,
Hmm.
for my first year and a half with the Dodgers. And then they transitioned me back into a reliever role, which is what I was called up, with the Dodgers initially in 2011.
It's just kind of interesting because they actually did like a feature during the draft last year about like, be very leery of drafting like college relievers. Like they just don't seem
Uh-huh.
to like do well. And I mean, I think the assumption is if you aren't good enough to pitch as a weekend guy, in college, who's to say that you're going to be a big league regular? You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
what was it
Yeah.
about going to the bullpen that made you better? Was it that you narrowed a pitch mix, or was it just like a mentality thing? Did you feel like it helped your development?
I remember when it happened, it was actually kind of by chance.
Hmm.
I was starting on a Friday night, and our bullpen was kind of like iffy
Hmm.
when I was at Purdue. But I was starting on a Friday against Indiana, and typical Midwest weather, it was like snowing, raining, sleeting, and sunny all at the same time. And the game on Friday ended up getting canceled, but I had pitched an inning.
Hmm.
So I wasn't going to start. And then the next day, our coach came and asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you think you could come in relief today?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I feel fine. I probably can't start. I can give you an inning though."
Hmm.
So, in Big Ten play, we had double headers on Saturdays. So I come in, I think it was in the first game of the doubleheader to close the game out, and I was like 95, 96, which I hadn't thrown that hard as a starter the entire year.
Hmm.
So after the game, he was like, "Hey, we need a closer. What do you think?" And, I thought from that standpoint, I can impact multiple games on the weekend, instead of just one. So, let's do it, and kind of just took off from there.
That's awesome. And so it worked out well. You became a second rounder
Hmm.
again. Um, but fast forwarding a little bit after, some time in the minor leagues, what initially got you to the big leagues wasn't enough to keep you consistently in the big
Hmm.
leagues. So I'm curious, like, as you look at it in hindsight, what kept you from sticking on a big league roster between, 2011 and 2014?
Yeah, I think not knowing who I was as a pitcher, one of the hardest, um, battles guys face when they get into pro ball is you're drafted and you're immediately compared to somebody.
Hmm.
And coming up through the minor leagues, being drafted, that's something mentally that I had to fight, was just fighting those comparisons. You get compared to guys, and you're trying to be somebody you're not. And in that 2011 and 2014 period, I was a reliever. I had set up. Um, I'd been kind of like a long guy, and then I get traded, two or three times. Was traded from LA to Philly, Philly to Texas, and then on to Texas, I become a starter. So, I didn't know who I was as a pitcher. I'd gone to different organizations, I'd relieved, I'd started. So I was kind of in like this searching process of who am I, and, what makes me good.
And so you kind of get to that point in your career where you've been up and down a little bit in the big leagues.
Hmm.
And then, obviously, I think it was Pittsburgh claimed you off waivers, correct?
Hmm.
And then about a week later, you signed to go to Korea. So
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, what led to that decision? Was just like, opportunity fell into your lap? Was it something you were actively seeking out? Because I think historically guys think like Japan, Japan, Japan. That's like the first place,
Yeah.
but Korea has also kicked out some really, really good players.
Hmm.
Guys who have gone over and developed and come back. So where was your head at with that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Being up and down, being designated, not having, a solid foundation, of knowing where I was going to be kind of led into that. And, our son was born, December 17th of that year.
Mhm.
And we got a call about 2 or 3 hours after he was born from my agent at the time. And he had said, hey, you have an offer from Korea and you have 24 hours to decide. And so, just as a family, having some stability,
Yeah.
going somewhere, knowing that you're going to make pretty good money.
Mhm.
It was at the time what was best for our family. And, looking back now, obviously it was the best decision that I've made in my career.
Yeah. Did the whole family come with you when you first went over?
Yeah, they did. So they waited a little bit, but they all 5 years that I was there, they spent with me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. So that happens in December of 14. You go over there and you pitch
Mm-hmm.
during 15, and we met up that fall. And
Mm-hmm.
like I distinctly remember a conversation we had in my office where you were like, "Hey, I threw 88 innings in 2014, and I just threw over 200 innings." And I'm like expecting the next like line to be like, "My arm feels like it's gonna fall off, my whole body hurts." And you were like, "I feel awesome. I feel like I could keep going." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, guys don't almost triple their inning outputs from one year to the next." I know you've been a starter in the past, but like it was a big innings jump, right? Like nowadays, like we hear about like, don't bump more than 10% week to week, like stay away from like the 1.5 to 1 acute to chronic workload. So it flies in the face of everything we know about innings limits. So
Yeah.
what was it, man? Like, what is it? Your routine that changed? Was it the Korean game? Like, was there something different about going over there that allowed you to handle that workload?
Well, I mean, I think first I wouldn't recommend it.
Fair point.
Yeah. Because, there were some effects the next year. I mean, I felt good, but, the next year I struggled a little bit. I created some bad habits. But, going back, I'm not sure what it was. I think part of it was having an opportunity. A lot of it was adrenaline. You show up in Korea, you show up in Japan, and like you're the guy.
Yeah.
The team looks to you every time you get the ball. You're expected to win. So I think a little bit of that was responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that my teammates counted on me. And then just the routine. You start to feel confident. You start to get the ball every 5-6 days,
Mm-hmm.
and you just the innings start to pile up, the starts start to pile up, and you just kind of like ride that wave.
Yeah.
And like you said, I didn't really feel, my body felt fine.
Mm-hmm.
I had a good base built up from a strength and conditioning standpoint. So I think that just kind of a multitude of factors.
I think you also talked about wasn't manual therapy over there just a lot easier to
Mm-hmm.
come by? Like I feel like you've been
Yeah.
up and down between AAA and the big leagues. So in AAA you don't always have the resource you need. You go to the
Mm-hmm.
big leagues and you never want to be that guy that's always asking for it
Mm-hmm.
when you're just trying to stick on a roster. Like did they actually push more massage stuff like that in Korea?
Yeah, they did. So the starter routine, I mean, manual therapy was available every single day if you wanted it. There were guys on our team that took advantage of it. Full body, head to toe stuff. The way it works as a starting pitcher is that you kind of get assigned an inning during the game if you're not pitching, and you have that entire inning to go get treatment, to go get work done, whatever it might be. So there was more manual therapy. There was some stuff away from the field too, from like treatment standpoint, cupping,
Yep.
some different needling techniques
Mm-hmm.
that you had access to, but just the focus on the player, the treatment of the player, I think is a little different.
Yep.
And it just that goes to the staffs as well. When you're in the minor leagues, you have one trainer usually.
Yeah.
And sometimes at home a massage therapist comes in, but you just don't have access to that because of time.
Yep. Talk to me a little bit about the Korean game. It's
Mm-hmm.
obviously markedly different from American baseball. I think there was a period at which like it was known for having a really, really small strike zone. I don't know how it was then when you were there versus now. Fill me in a little bit about it, especially with the world watching a lot of Korean baseball right now. It's a good perspective.
Yeah. It's a high contact game. The biggest difference is depth. 1 through 5, 1 through 6 in the lineups are usually pretty good. But the depth falls off pretty fast when you start having guys coming off the bench. From a hitting standpoint, it's more of a contact oriented um, game where you're 6, 7, 8, 9 guys. They're trying not to strike out. They're trying to put the ball in play and make the defense make plays. And then the other guys are trying to hit tanks. It's a lot more. The difference between, I guess, Korea and Japan would be baseball in Japan. It's a little bit more small ball oriented. Moving runners. Not as much emphasis on power. Obviously guys with power, but and in Korea it's just different. Swing paths are different. Swing mechanics are different. So there's a lot of adjustments that I had to make as a pitcher.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you help your development? I remember talking to Miles Michaelis about going to Japan. You're forced to field your position incredibly well. What were the things that you felt it forced you to learn as a pitcher about yourself?
So initially, I was, fastball, slider, changeup in the U.S. I go over there and immediately, my strikeout pitch was my slider and guys were fouling it off. So I needed a pitch that, looked like my fastball that created some depth. Guys' bats stay on planes so long there that they're able to just kind of throw their hands at pitches. So I needed to develop an out pitch. And then historically, I had always struggled with lefties a bunch. I didn't have anything that kind of ran into a lefty. Everything was primarily away. I was two seam, change up away, and then I'd run a four seam, but my four seam rides a little bit. So there's nothing truly coming into a lefty. And a lot of the lineups there are predominantly left-handed. So adding a cutter, adding a splitter, and that kind of opened up some different zones within the strike zone that I could attack and do some things a little differently.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, you just talked about a splitter, and I feel like if you go and you play baseball in Asia, you at least have to have the discussion, right? And I've been around some different guys, like Oliver Drake is one of our guys who I think he had the highest splitter usage of any pitcher in baseball last year. I was fortunate to spend a lot of time around Kurt Schilling kind of late in his career, and I know Kurt talks, he throws a split finger fastball. Like it's not a changeup to him. It's a power pitch that he holds very light in his fingertips. I'm curious, what's your mindset with respect to a splitter? Everything from how tight you grip it to where you start it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So I'd agree with that. So the splitter is a power pitch. It's a fastball. It's also, I would say it's one of the harder pitches to throw. That's why, I don't think a lot of guys throw it is because of how volatile it can be. You're trying to kill spin to create drop. And when you kill spin, the consistency of the break isn't going to necessarily be there like it would on a curveball or, even a fastball or a cutter.
Yep.
So, my mindset is fastball. And I kind of call it like a primal pitch. It's one of those pitches that I'm thinking, get my front foot down and then just fire it.
Yeah.
But from a pressure standpoint, I would say I hold it like a fastball, from a pressure standpoint, but I focus on the pressure being in between, my first two knuckles, which would be on my index finger and my middle finger. And I'm just trying to squeeze at those 2 points, just a little bit to allow that ball to kind of slip out.
Yeah, I feel like that's the difference between a split and a fork ball. I think they've talked about Drake's being actually like a fork ball, and it's much tighter in his hand. Whereas I always remember Kurt showing it off, and you could legally just pull the baseball out of his hand very, very easy. It would just slide out because it just wasn't taken quite as wide. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And put it this way, how did you use it? That's a strange thing to say, but when you look at a Schilling, I keep coming back to him. He had a pitch that he threw for a strike and one that he didn't. He had a four seam and a split, and he would mix in a breaking ball here and there. How was your usage with that? Was it something that was always a swing and miss pitch, or how did you attack things with it?
Yeah, it's primarily swing and miss pitch for me. But with that being said, I can use it at any point in the count.
Yep.
I'm never trying to throw a strike with it. But if I know a guy's geared up for a fastball, it's a great pitch to throw. I like throwing it 0-0, throwing it behind in the count. If I can, start it up a little bit. But my thought process is kind of just driving it right through the catcher's neck. That way I'm keeping it on line, a little bit above the knee. And that plays off of my four seam really well.
Yeah.
And then trusting that the grip, that it's going to go, going to go down.
That's the thing. You're not trying to start it lower. Like you're throwing it just like heater. Okay. That's an interesting one. So building on that, how has the pitch mix changed over the years, right? So there have been four seams, two seams, cutters, sliders, curveballs, changeup, and the splitter. Like, how has the arsenal evolved to what it is nowadays? And have you also dealt with challenges where, at times they blended together in certain cases?
Yeah. I'm a kitchen sink guy. I don't, that was part of that discovery process of going to Korea, is realizing, I'm not a guy that's going to go out and, I'm not going to sit 96, 97. But I can command my fastball. I've ditched my two seam. Now I've got a really, really good spin rate. So I can command my fastball in all quadrants of the zone. And then, I've got a cutter. I have a changeup, split, curveball, and this offseason I added a horizontal slider.
Nice.
And the issue, like you said, is making sure that those pitches don't blend together and they just become like 1.5 pitches. And with the technology we have now, it's like TrackMan and Rapsodo. Like, it's really, really easy on the pitch plots to see if those pitches are starting to blend together, which is something that mine luckily haven't done. Even the changeup and the split have different movement profiles. And those two you would think would have very, very similar, but mine are different, and they're different in the way that I use them as well.
That's interesting. I feel like I don't know if this has been your experience. I've caught enough splitters, like in just bullpens, where I had no problem catching the guys where the bottom just kind of fell out of it. The guys that I hated were the ones that had like the weird knuckle, that had like a lot of like arm side run to it. Those are the ones that just destroyed my thumbs over and over again. So Josh James from the Astros had a split like that coming up, and it was terrifying to catch. So is yours more predictable, you feel like?
Yeah, it's gotten more predictable for sure. I remember early on, it would knuckle. It would kind of do some funny stuff. But that's part of the volatility of the pitch when you kill the spin, is that it just doesn't rotate very consistently. So it's one of those pitches that you have to throw a lot, that I have to get a feel for. It's always usually like the last pitch that I get a feel for in spring training or coming into a season. But once I have it, it's a really, really good pitch for me.
I like it. So we talked about how the pitch mix has evolved. I'm curious how also like the preparation from like just a strength conditioning stuff on a 5-day rotation. Cause I know in Korea you sometimes get a little bit longer, correct? Like now you're on a 5-day rotation coming back to the US. What's a 5-day rotation look like for you first in terms of throwing? So day 0, you go out, you make a start, you throw 95 pitches, whatever it is. What are you doing days 1, 2, 3, and 4 to get ready for that next start?
So day 1 for me is no throw. I picked that up, Derek Lowe, and I think it was 2013, 2014. And just the thought process behind that is throughout the course of a season, I can build in a month of off days. And that's been huge for me, to be able to do that. Day 2, is kind of is my long toss day, more of like a volume day, not so much intensity. Day 3 would be my bullpen day, more intensity rather than volume. Day 4 would be just like a light catch day, just make sure my arm's still hanging on. And then I'd go back out on day 5 and start it and do it all over again.
Nice. And then what about like the strength conditioning, sprint work, et cetera, et cetera? What do those 4 days look like?
That's something that's really changed over the course of the year or years. Understanding, and I've been lucky, obviously, having you as a resource, the guys that I train with now at iFast. But understanding that everything that I do is stress. And that stress either positively or negatively impacts my performance, so whether it's sleep, whether it's nutrition, whether it's throwing, whether it's lifting, whether it's, picking my kids up, whether if they're driving me nuts, like all of those things add up.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I start, I'm trying to get back to baseline on my start day.
Yep.
So understanding kind of like that curve for me, and planning my routine out has been really, really helpful, in getting back to baseline, whatever that might be for that day. But, trying to condense, workload, trying to condense volume and intensity on specific days, really prioritizing recovery, on specific days, just to get back to that.
Yeah. I think, one of the things you talked about was that day 3 bullpen. And if I can pick, I'm always picking day 3 just because it gives you so much wiggle room on, you talked about, the day 1 no throw. Are you lifting on that day? Or are you doing manual therapy? Are you chilling out in like mobility circuits, just some positional breathing? What's that first day look like for you?
Yeah. The first day, is a recovery focus.
Yep.
I'm doing my positional breathing stuff,
Yeah.
all my resets.
Yep.
I'm getting, the workout has changed actually this year a little bit, and I like it. Is that it's more of like a mobility circuit. It's quick. The workout really doesn't last any longer than like 30, 35 minutes.
Yep.
So it's in, it's out, and I'm done.
Leave feeling refreshed.
Yeah, exactly. Just because, the day before you've pretty much trashed your body.
Yeah.
So then to go out and have to do it again the next day, the lift usually isn't as good.
Yeah.
The intensity is usually not as good. So then I push that back to which would be day 2.
Yep.
More my heavier lift.
And I think there's something to be said about it, right? You have day 0, which is obviously like probably the most stressful of your 5 days. And then you have kind of like a combination of day 2 / day 3, which is like it's basically a 24-hour block where you lift and you do your bullpens. I don't know do you do a lift on both days 2 and day 3? Will you do something on both, or just one?
Yeah. Usually I'll do both. I'll do the lift on both days. Usually 2 total bodies.
There you go. So
and the lift on day 3 for me, is quick. It's like 20, 30 minutes.
Yep.
And the way that we've kind of structured that is a higher intensity, lower volume, being able to touch, some heavier weight, move it fast, and just kind of, because there is the stress from the bullpen, coming in and just knocking it out, especially with the day 2 being more of a heavier volume day.
Yep. It's perfect, man. You've got a high-low model right there, right? Day 0 is high. Day 1 is low. Day 2 into early day 3 is high. Day 4 is low, and then go do it again. And it works really well. What we see a lot of are guys that make the mistake of, right, they go out and they throw 100 pitches on day 0. Then they come in on day 1, they crush a lower body lift. And then they throw a day 2 pen, and then they lift on day 3, and they wonder why they're just literally racing to play catch up on day 4, so they don't feel so terrible on day 5. So we've seen guys like Soroka is a guy who actually lifts right after his start, just as a way to kind of consolidate. He's done that in the past. Kluber did that in the past a little bit too. So it's not for everybody, but it's a way to consolidate it, right?
Yeah, and there's certain days that I have where on day games, I'll do that, where I'll lift after my start. Not so much on a night game, but on a day game, sometimes I'll lift before, post start. That way I've got, an extra, 12 or however many hours, to recover in that process.
Yeah. Well, you find it, I know this is something we see a lot in the off season. Like we have a lot of guys who don't like Monday bullpens if they didn't throw on Sunday. Like they'll be like catch Monday and bullpen Tuesday. Do you feel rusty when you take that day 1? Like when you come out to lawn toss on day 2, does it feel sticky or anything like that? Or you usually feel you can groove right into it?
Yeah, I usually feel like I can groove right into it. I think, there's this like common belief in baseball that if we take a day off, we're going to get worse.
Yeah, I know.
And I've never really understood it. It's like, we throw a baseball for 7, 8, 9 months straight out of the year. And, we're not going to get worse. You might feel a little weird, going out for 5 or 10 throws, but I mean, we know how to throw baseballs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I always love the day 1 off, man. I'm glad you're carrying the flag.
I love it. It's huge.
So you hinted at your work with the crew at IFAST, and Mike and
Hmm.
Bill are good friends for a long time, and some of the really progressive guys in the field.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what you picked up there and how it's impacted your preparation and durability, because they're doing some real cool stuff, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I gotta thank you for the contact on that one,
Oh,
because
it's
you're the
all
one that put me in touch with
good.
them. But Mike and Bill are great, and then everybody that I've come in contact with. Ty Terrell wrote my
Yeah,
programming my first year. One of your old interns,
yeah.
Jason Neal,
There you go.
wrote some programming,
Yeah,
and then now Eric Huddleston. But
yeah.
I think the common thread, like with you, with Mike and Bill, is that their goal is just to build athletes, and it's to make people feel better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what sold me on them, just like you, is that, you go in and Bill is working with, a 10-year-old kid. And then he's working with me, and then he's got, an 85-year-old client.
Mm-hmm.
And, you see that athletes are all ages. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
it's true.
But the thing that they've really helped me realize there, is, more of like a longevity,
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it. How everything, from the resets, how, the resets, the PRI resets, they drive the warm up, and then the warm up and the movement patterning, drives the lift, and then the lifts should drive, the movements on the field. And I think what happens a lot of times in especially baseball strength and conditioning, because it's such a fine, movement pattern in baseball, is that these things become mutually exclusive from one another.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, you prescribe, your breathing resets, and then the player doesn't understand how that's affecting, what he does on the field, he or she does on the field. And what Bill and Mike have been able to show me is that all of these things are connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the same movement patterns that you're trying to reinforce are the same movement patterns that I'm trying to get to on the field,
Mm-hmm.
in order to put my body in good positioning.
I find myself on a daily basis, like I'll be teaching some kind of like a half kneeling one arm cable press with like an opposite arm reach or something like that. And I'm
Hmm.
literally just like, think glove side fastball. Like
Yeah.
what does your scapula need to do to get to that position? And I think if you can
Hmm.
create context, that you're always going to win athletes over more, whether you're talking about basketball players, tennis players, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So you got to build on
Yeah,
what
for
they've got.
sure. And yeah, and for me, like, I have something that I never would have even realized had I not gone there. Like, I have a hard time, finding my heels.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just naturally like, I want to get to my toes.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as a pitcher, like, if I want to get to my toes, I'm going to become very, very quad dominant,
Mm-hmm.
when I go to throw, and I'm not going to be able to get into my right, my right glute. So, a lot of the lifts that I do, I'm focused on, pushing myself back, staying into my heels, finding, my right arch,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that that's all movement patterning on the mound that I'm trying to do when I go to drive off the mound and drive down the mound. Like, I'm doing these lifts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, it's very, very important for athletes to realize.
Don't just, we talk even just deadlifting, right? Don't just think about lifting the weight. Think about
Hmm.
putting force into the ground in an efficient
Yep.
manner. And those can be like life-changing, like aha moments if you really
Hmm.
start to think them through. So,
Yeah, I still remember my first deadlift lesson from you, talking about, pushing the ground away from you. Don't think
yeah,
about lifting the weight, think about pushing the ground away from you, finding your feet, being connected.
yeah,
So yeah, it all translates.
it's the name of the game. All right. So we always go to a lightning round on the tail end. This is where I get to,
All right.
actually, I stole this from Robertson. So shout out to Mike. He used this on this podcast. We just asked baseball questions. So, all right. First one. What advice would you give to a teenage Josh Lindblom?
Yeah. Know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Know who you are. Spend time doing that. Know what makes you good. And build a foundation, to play from.
I like that. All right. Favorite pitchers to watch. Who do you like to watch and why in the game?
I love watching Zach Greinke.
Mm-hmm.
I see, just the way that he pitches, commanding the baseball, very cerebral. Obviously, I mean, you love watching, guys like Garrett Cole,
Mm-hmm.
Justin Verlander, but probably Greinke would be my favorite.
That's a good one. We haven't used that one, or we haven't heard that one on any of the responses. But I'll tell you what, if you're looking to show like a 16-year-old kid pretty efficient mechanics. I know Matt Blake, who's now our pitcher coach of the Yankees. Matt, years and years and years at the facility, would show Greinke. He wasn't a big dude, but commanded everything. Really athletic.
Yeah.
It worked. It was very efficient. So that's a good.
And you just watch his career arc too. He was a guy that won the Cy Young and was 96, 97 unhittable, and now he's 90 to 93 commands. So he's really fun to watch pitch, and to see his development too has been neat.
I like that. I'm actually really intrigued to get your take on this one. We've asked this among a bunch of guys and gotten probably 50-50 responses. What's more important, stuff or command?
I would say command.
Really?
Yeah, I would. Stuff is obviously important.
I thought you'd go the other way because you have like 9 different pitches.
Well, so when we say stuff, are we meaning like pitch grades?
Yeah,
or are we meaning just like overall?
Yeah, that could go in a lot of different directions. I guess stuff would also be a 100-mile-an-hour heater. So
yeah,
it's a tough one, but
yeah. So I would say the important thing to realize with stuff and command is that they're tools. These are merely tools in a tool belt. And I actually had an exchange on Twitter the other day. When you go to build a house and if all you have is a screwdriver, you aren't going to get very far. So understanding that command, that stuff, that pitch mix, these are all tools, in your tool belt when you go out into a game that you can use. So I don't think that, any one can be better than the other. And both kind of afford you different things to do and ways to be successful.
I like that. All right. Favorite teammate of all time and why? Can be any level.
Man, this is a tough lightning round one. I'm going to have to go. So I'm going to have to say 2 people.
All right. That's fine.
So Juan Pierre.
Oh yeah.
Is one of the best teammates that I've ever had. Unbelievable human being, unbelievable teammate, just all around awesome guy. Extremely helpful, encouraging. Can't say enough good things about Juan.
I've heard that from a number of different guys too. Cishek and a lot of the Marlins guys raved about him.
Just amazing person. And then my first year, Jamie Wright, journeyman reliever. He was my catch partner, and he taught me more about being a big leaguer. He taught me more about, being a good teammate, than I think anybody that I've had been with in my career. And he just wanted the best for everybody. And here's a guy, I think Jamie, this isn't like an official record, but I think 10 years in a row, he went into spring training as a non-roster invite and made the team every single year.
That's insane.
Yeah. Insane.
Really good. Wow. All right. So last one. I know
Okay.
you're a prolific reader, whether that's with respect to baseball, your faith, anything imaginable.
Yeah.
What's a book you would recommend to just about any up and coming baseball player or coach?
Man, you're asking some hard questions here. I've got to go with Mental ABCs of Pitching.
There you go.
For up and coming baseball players. I've read that thing cover to cover, hundreds of times. And have it actually, Roy, when I played with Roy Halladay, he gave it to me on, before audiobooks were audiobooks. I have it on a CD.
That's awesome.
At my house. He paid somebody to have him record it. So I think up and coming baseball player, that would be one. It's just so good.
That's good feedback. All right, folks can find you on Twitter. It's Josh Lindblom 52, and then Instagram it's JLBoomer25.
Yes.
This was awesome, man. Really enjoyed catching up, and lots of good tidbits in here for players, coaches, parents, all the above. So I appreciate you taking the time.
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it's good. Always good talking with you.
Absolutely, man. We're keeping our fingers crossed for a season this year because I'm looking forward to seeing you go out and do your thing back here in the U.S. So best of luck this year. Thanks again.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.